Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So even though we're still like 2 months away from the start of the NHL season, I know a lot of you guys, your fantasy hockey drafts are coming up, and I kind of want to start pumping out a little bit of fantasy hockey content because I'm an absolute fantasy hockey degenerate. Me and my friends have been in the same league since 2014. I absolutely love it. So today I wanted to give you 12 sleepers that I think could really break out and potentially help you win your league. This is going to be mainly for like 8, 10, 12, or 14 team leagues. If you're in like a 6-team league, these guys are pretty deep sleepers. I mean, you're not going to be, if you have like 120 selections total in your draft, you're probably not even going to get to these guys. But this is more for the larger leagues, some guys that I think will go in the later rounds that could end up being very solid roster players. Now, when looking at this, I'm going to be doing generally like standard ESPN default scoring or Yahoo or whatever app that you use. Based on that, I'm going to be factoring in hits and block shots. I assume that your league has that. That's something that I really look at, especially in fantasy, considering how consistent that is. So without further ado, let's dive into it. And up first, the guy that I was shocked when I saw that his average draft position was 180th overall was Gustav Forsling, man. ESPN is currently projecting him to only have 11 goals, 28 assists for 39 points in 80 games. I think that's like his floor based on what we've seen from him the past 2 years. He had 41 points back in 2023 and 39 points this season. So when looking at the amount that he emerged this season as Florida's just straight up best defenseman, on top of them losing their best offensive defenseman in Brandon Montour, I think that we could really be looking at a legit 50-ish point season from Gustav Forsling. And last year, he had a very solid 102 block shots, 111 hits. You want around 200 combined for defensemen in that category. So when looking at him, yeah, I think that he could easily end up being your number 3 defenseman in a 10-team league. And he's definitely going to be the number 1 defenseman. I don't know if he's going to get the number 1 power play, but I think he's probably going to play more than a guy like Aaron Ekblad. And there's such a drop-off after Ekblad and Forsling heading into next season that he's probably going to play 23, 24 minutes. Only played 22 minutes last year. So I think there's going to be an increased role. And as a result, he is going to be a decent sleeper for a lot of guys in terms of heading into next season. Next up, we got a little bit of a 2-pack, but I'm pretty high on both Victor Arvidsson, whose ADP right now is 196th overall, and Jeff Skinner. When looking at Arvidsson in his 3 seasons in LA, he had 123 points in 161 games, good for 26 goal pace, 63-point pace. So you look at that, he might not be on that top power play, but assuming he plays with either Draisaitl or McDavid, I think you could be looking at a 65, 70-point season. And then for Jeff Skinner, 176th overall in the ADP. And this guy is a year removed from a 35-goal, 47 assists, 82-point season. He could easily be point per game. Again, those guys probably aren't cracking the top power play, and they don't get monster hits or block shots. But for a guy like Leon Draisaitl that is badly needed top-end winger talent, if they both play with Draisaitl, they could have fantastic years and be steals in the later rounds of your draft. Mark Stone's an interesting one, 196th ADP right now. ESPN's not too high on him because they're only accounting for him to play 60 games, and I definitely understand it. He usually does his LTIR stint the final 20 games of the season, but I still would take him. If you're not certain that you're going to make the playoffs, take a guy like Mark Stone at 130th, 140th overall, because when he is healthy, when he plays those first 3 quarters of a season, he's a top 80 player. He put up around 27 goal, 52 assists, 79 points pace since he arrived in Las Vegas. So I think that it is definitely worth it. He gets good hits. He gets good block shots. Maybe if you're in a less competitive league and you really only care about the playoffs, maybe stay away from him. But if you're battling it out for a 4 seed to just make the playoffs, a guy like Mark Stone is definitely going to be worth it. And at least if you know that he goes on LTIR in the middle of February, you're not going to hold on to him for like multiple weeks praying that he's going to come back. He's obviously not. Just cut him loose. But that first 3 quarters of the season, he will definitely outperform his draft position and help you end up making the playoffs in a massive way. Next up, we got Cole Caulfield, probably a controversial pick, the best 50 goal scorer to never score 30 goals in a season. But when looking at him last year, 28 goals, 37 assists for 65 points in 82 games. ESPN has him projected right around the same numbers. They have actually have him projected at only 27 goals next season, which I think is ridiculous considering the fact that this guy shot only 8% last year. Snipers like him usually shoot between 15 to 17%. So I think there is real potential for him to potentially have a 40 and 40 kind of season. season, if not around 35 and 40 assists, because that top line of him, Suzuki, and Slavkovsky are only going to get better. Very impressive last year, especially in the back half of the season. So when looking at that line on top of the power play being pretty decent, Mike Matheson quarterbacking that power play, I think Caulfield's going to break out in the same way. The same way that Suzuki broke out this season, I think Caulfield's going to have a similar breakout. I'd set his goal over under genuinely at 35, 36. He doesn't get a lot of hits or block shots, so there is some, if your league heavily cares about that, if the scoring is weighted a lot towards hits/block shots, maybe not as high, but if it's not, he is a potential 40 and 40 guy. He is a potential legit top 70 fantasy hockey player heading into next season. I don't think that that's ridiculous. Sticking in the Atlantic Division, Jake Sanderson, an ADP of 98th. He took a step offensively yet again this season, up to 38 points. Went from playing 21.55 a night to playing 23.13, and that's probably only going to go up to around 24, maybe 24.30 a night, considering I don't think the fact that Jacob Chychrun out, Nick Jensen in. I think that Nick Jensen's going to play less than Jacob Chychrun did. He took over as the top power play defenseman ahead of Thomas Chabot last season. So I think, especially given the fact that he has 150 block shots each of the past two seasons, he is a safe bet to probably be, I think he's going to go for around 50 points and be a legit top 25, top 20 fantasy defenseman heading into next season, and I would take him pretty high on my board. This one's probably more so for like 12 or 14 team leagues if you're in those leagues, but I think Anthony Duclair is a great potential snag in the later rounds. He has a 229 ADP as of right now, and you look at him, once he actually had talent around him. In Florida, his final two seasons, he had 41 goals, 49 assists for 90 points in 117 games. When he was in Tampa after he got traded, he had 8 goals, 7 assists, 15 points in 17 games. Wasn't that good on the San Jose Sharks, but who is that good on the San Jose Sharks? So when looking at him heading to the New York Islanders this season, I think he has legit 30 and 30 kind of potential. ESPN only has him projected at around 20 and 20 potential, so I think that he is going to outperform, especially in these bigger leagues. If you can get 30 and 30 out of Anthony Duclair in a 12 to 14 team league, he is definitely going to be a roster level player. Next up, a guy that I've criticized a lot, Elias Lindholm, 147th ADP. I don't like the signing. I still don't like the signing, but there is serious fantasy potential for a guy like Lindholm heading to Boston, potentially centering one of the second best right winger in the entire NHL. He's 2 years removed from scoring 42 goals, 40 assists, and 82 points. I don't think that he's going to rack up those goals playing with Pastrnak, but he could potentially have like 27 assists, 27 goals, 47 assists, 74 points, while also being very solid in terms of hit/block shots. He accumulates around 120 to 150 a season. So I like the upside. Again, not using a high draft pick, but around the 14th to 20th round, end of the draft, you're just looking for a guy that potentially has upside. Elias Lindholm definitely has that kind of upside because he is playing with such an elite player. Elias Lindholm himself, not an elite player, but when you're playing with a guy that has posted back-to-back 110-point seasons and you're probably going to be on the top power play with him, I like your fantasy. I like you in fantasy. I look for the guys on the top lines, on the top power play, and they're going to play a decent amount. And I think Lindholm definitely fits the bill in terms of a player that could deliver that. Seth Jarvis, 154th ADP. I was shocked that ESPN is only projecting him for a 26 goal, 29 assist, 55-point season after he just had 33 goals, 34 assists for 67 points at 22 years old. And when looking at it, he's only going to have even more opportunity this year on the Carolina Hurricanes after the guys that they lost this offseason. He's going to be on that top power play. There's a decent chance that he plays with Svechnikov and Sebastian Aho at even strength. I think that 35 and 35 is like not the bar, like probably his floor, honestly, is probably like 30 and 30 at this point. But I think that he could legitimately be sniffing 40 and 40, maybe 35 and 45 or something like that. And he gets very, very solid hits for a guy of his age at the forward position. I really like Seth Jarvis this year in fantasy. And even if he just repeats last season, that would clearly outperform 154th ADP, considering what he brought to the table. Sticking with some younger guys, Dylan Cousins has 176th average draft position as of right now. I understand why. Did have a bit of a down year after having 31 goals, 37 assists for 68 points in the 2023 season. Last year, only 18 goals, 29 assists for 47 points. ESPN doesn't really have him bouncing back that that much. They have him at 23 goals, 31 assists, 54 points, so a 7-point increase. He only shot 9% last year. When looking at him in 2023, he shot like 17%. I think he's going to get back to around the 14 to 15% mark. And the power play really cratered for Buffalo this season. They went from fourth. They went from last year being ninth to this year being fourth to worst in the NHL, on top of the overall offense stalling out a little bit. Not sure Buffalo is going to be a playoff team, but I think their offense is going to be a lot better. And when you look at his wingers, he's going to have guys like Jack Quinn, Peterka, Benson taking another step. Not going to be on that top line, not going to be playing with like an Alex Tuck on his wing, but I think that he's going to have better wingers around him. So I think that he's going to be around the 28 goal, 38 assists, 66, maybe get around 70 points this season. On top of the fact that last year he went from 55 hits to 108 hits. That is massive if your league cares about hits. And as a result, I'm decently high on Dylan Cousins. I think he's going to bounce back and be a solid low-end roster player heading into next season, and he has legit potential to really break out on that Buffalo Sabres team. This one's going to be controversial, but I would take a flyer on a 10, 12, 14 team league. I would take a flyer on PLD. Maybe not an 8-team league, but when you look at him a season ago, last year in Winnipeg, or 2 seasons ago in Winnipeg, he had 27 goals, 36 assists, 63 points in 73 games, on top of having 130 combined hits/block shots. He actually throws the body a decent amount compared to some other guys. He was a legit roster guy, even in like 8-team leagues back in his final season in Winnipeg. I have some concerns about him being that second-line center in Washington. He's going to be playing with like Sonny Milano and Andrew Mangiapane. Maybe he eventually gets bumped up to that first-line center position, and the top power play should be half decent. But I would take a risk. I would take a chance on PLD. You give him a week or two at the start of the start of the season. If he performs, great. You hold on to him for a while. He has serious upside. If not, cut him loose. Don't waste like a 13th round pick on PLD, but as a potential sleeper, I could see him potentially going good. Lastly, we got Pavel Buchnevich. When looking at him, he had a bit of a down year last year, 27 goals, 36 assists, 63 points, playing 19.49 a night. Very impressive. But the prior 2 seasons, he had 56 goals, 87 assists, 143 points in 136 games with solid hits and block shots. He was the legit top 75 fantasy player, and he has 164 ADP as of right now. That is absolutely absurd. I think he's going to bounce back. Maybe not be above point per game like in 2023, but I can easily see a 32 goal, 42 assists, 74 point season with his solid hits and block shots and safely being a roster player. Not sure if he's going to play with Robert Thomas or Jordan Kyrou, but I still think he can kind of carry his own line, and I think the power play should be pretty solid for the St. Louis Blues. And as a result, I'm probably going to take him around the 13th, 14th round in my 8-team league. I like Pavel Buchnevich a lot. He really helped me out in 2022 and 2023 with my fantasy hockey team. But here's the recap. Gustav Forsling, this guy might be the guy that I'm the highest on and has the most breakout potential. Both of the Edmonton wingers that they got, Mark Stone, the first 3 quarters of the season, you're going to get your money's worth. Cole Caulfield, Jake Sanderson, Anthony Duclair, more of a 12 or 14 league guy. Elias Lindholm playing with David Pastrnak. Seth Jarvis, I don't know why ESPN is so goddamn low on him. Dylan Cousins, Pierre-Luc Dubois, and then Pavel Buchnevich. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about this? I didn't throw any goalies in. Goalies are a little bit too sporadic. Maybe I'll make a separate goalie like Instagram list or something like that. But let me know in the comments, what do you think about it? I'll be seeing the next one.